Hey everyone, AJ Brown here. Follow-up conversation today to a previous episode where we discussed, does size really matter? And it does. And we're talking about position sizing. Position sizing where we take into account the management of risk, not possible or probable reward. I'm going to go ahead and link that episode down in the description. If you haven't followed along with that, please go check it out. But the conversation then followed to what sort of maximum allowable risk should I open my portfolio to for any one of my investments. And we're going to cover that today. But before going any further, whether you are listening to me on a podcast, you're listening through Spotify, Apple iTunes, Google Podcasts, or any of the other sites that are carrying my podcast, or you're watching me in a YouTube video, or on my Facebook page, you're following me there, or on my Instagram page, take a moment right this minute, subscribe to my podcast on Spotify, on Apple iTunes, Google Podcasts. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Facebook. Follow my Instagram page. Like this particular video and sign up for the notifications. Click that notifications bell so that you are notified the minute I release another one of these delicious pieces of content. All right. So we talked about in the previous episode, just in a quick summary, about how we size positions for risk. There's this mathematical formula we follow. There's no science. There's no art. It's this simple mathematical formula which says, hey, the risk you open up your portfolio to is going to be whatever the risk is in the investment times the size of your investment. Now we can move that around and we can say, okay, the amount that we're going to put in as the size of our investment is going to be whatever risk we open up our portfolio to divided by the risk of that particular investment. Or even more, if we want to talk about worst case scenario, what we do is we determine what the worst case scenario risk is in that particular investment. We take what we want the worst case scenario risk to our portfolio to be. We divide the max risk of the investment by the max risk of the portfolio, or actually vice versa. We divide the max risk of our portfolio by the max risk of our investment, and we will get what our position size should be, what the maximum size of our position, what maximum percentage of our portfolio should we put into that particular investment. We covered that in the last episode. But here's the question. The question is, what amount of my portfolio should I risk? Now, I've been teaching and watching and hand-holding investors through learning how to do this investing. Here's what I've come up with. Get your piece of paper out, take some note. For portfolios less than $5,000, we want to risk no more than 4% of our portfolio in any one of our investments. If we have a portfolio between $5,000 and $25,000, drop that down to no more than 3%. If it's between $25,000 and $250,000, you should be investing and risking no more than 2% of your portfolio. And finally, if you have a portfolio bigger than $250,000, let's not risk more than 1%. Where did these numbers come from? These numbers come from my observations, and specifically from my investors, thousands of them, and that I've observed over the last 20 plus years trading equities and options. The scoop is, think of the worst case scenario here. If your portfolio is less than $5,000, then I'm telling you, you should risk no more than 4% of your portfolio in any one given position. That means you would have to have more than 25 positions go completely off the rails to their worst case scenario and bail yourself out of that transaction for you to lose your whole portfolio. All of these scenarios where you hear of people who in a single investment lose half of their portfolio would be a discussion of the past. Here's a hot tip. If you are bailed out of your positions more than 3 times in a row, that means you've gone to your worst case amount of risk possible in that particular investment. And if that happens to you 3 times in a row, you need to stop what you're doing. You need to take inventory and you need to reassess. In fact, let's go into that a little bit deeper. Again, if you're bailed out of your positions more than 3 times in a row, bailed out means that you have hit that max risk of the position that you planned for and you've cashed out at a complete loss, right? If that happens to you 3 times in a row, you need to stop what you're doing, take inventory, and reassess. Why? Because it's not the investments in the markets throwing something unexpected at you. If it happens 3 times in a row where your positions go to the worst of your plan possible, it may be how you see and interpret investable patterns. It may be how you plan out your investments, including the automatic bailouts that are supposed to protect you. You may need to gain more knowledge about being an investor. You for sure need more experience, and you get that by doing more practice. Now, with investing with equities and options, there are paper trading accounts and simulator trading accounts. You need to do that. Your money that you are investing, whether you earned it or somebody else earned it and gave it to you, it took too much energy to acquire in the first place for you to throw it away because you don't have enough, perhaps knowledge, definitely experience and practice. And there's no excuse with you being able to use a simulator and brushing up your skills and make sure things are going to work. So that's the hot tip. If you find that your plans are going to the worst case scenario and that happens to you 3 times in a row, it's not the markets, it's you. Stop what you're doing, take inventory, reassess, practice. The Apollo 13 astronauts come to mind. They practiced and practiced in that simulator so that when they actually went off to the moon and actually had problems, they knew exactly what to do because it had all been simulated and planned for. Hope that helps a lot with those numbers and with those hot tips. Listen, if my content is giving you any benefit, whether you're listening to me in a podcast or on a YouTube channel or on my Facebook page or on my Instagram page, please pay it forward by taking a moment and subscribing to those channels. Subscribe to the Spotify podcast, the Apple iTunes podcast, the Google podcast, or wherever the podcast is being hosted that you're listening to. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Like this video. And please take a moment and hit that notifications button wherever you are. Be the first one to know every time I launch a new video or audio. Thanks, everyone. Till next time.